All right, why don't we go ahead and get started? We are at the top of the hour, and I'm Julie Struble with Charitable Advisors, and I want to say welcome to our HR nonprofit peer group. And today our topic is HR best practices for an ever-evolving world. And so today we're going to be talking about some trends that are reshaping the workforce. And I know trends that are currently experiencing in our own workplace personally is AI. Many of us have been scrambling to tackle the learning curve on how to be more productive and increase performance. Then, of course, there's the workplace culture, just being able to work with the dynamic of either in a remote or a hybrid workforce. And we're seeing more and more generations working together that could create its own challenges. And then, of course, retention, attraction and retention has been an ongoing issue for the last several years. So before we dive into today's presentation, let me just make some brief announcements. And first of all, I want to go ahead and announce the 2025 Central Indiana Nonprofit Salary Survey has officially launched. And I want to start off by saying thank you. We have gotten off to a great start, and prior to launching the survey, many organizations raised their hand to volunteer to complete the survey, and we're really overwhelmed by the positive response that we have had. So if you have already completed the survey or you have it on your calendar and you planned to complete it, thank you, thank you, thank you. This really means a lot, and it's going to help out a lot. For those of you who are not familiar with our compensation report, this is a comprehensive report which includes 26 nonprofit positions. And the report breaks down the data by the number of staff and the annual budgets by the quartile. So this is a guide that really is the guide to help you with attraction and retention. So our goal for the salary survey is to have 250 to 300 Central Indiana nonprofits complete the survey. And we know that the more organizations that participate, the more reliable that the data is. So I need your help. Will you please consider completing the salary survey? And to participate, we went ahead and created a form that you could complete. Go to our website, charitableadvisors.com, go to the resources tab, and then you're going to see the 2025 salary survey page there. First of all, the page is going to tell you about the survey and answer all your frequently asked questions. Plus, there is going to be a form on there. Enter the person at your organization who has access to your payroll information. Most likely it's your human resource director, director of operations, or if you're a smaller organization, the executive director. And if you complete the survey by February 15th, you are going to be entered into a drawing for a $50 Visa gift card. We're giving away 3 of them. So even though the survey is open through the month of February, we know if the unexpected is going to happen, it's going to happen after February 15th. So if you're able to wrap it up early, that's a super big help to us. And for participants will have early access to the release of the compensation report. It will be released in June. You will have access to it in June instead of the normal release date of September. And one last thing about the compensation report, typically these reports sell for $150 to $200. Our Central Indiana nonprofit report is free. And we want to give a shout out to the sponsors that have underwritten this: Charitable Allies, Barnes Denning CPA and Advisors, the National Bank of Indianapolis, and NFP. Thank you for underwriting this so we can make this a free resource to the community. Next off, so our next webinar is going to be late May or early June. I don't have a date set, but we're going to talk about writing skills-based job ads. This is going to help you attract the talent to help you meet those performance outcomes that you need to do to get you towards your mission. It also helps increase diversity and reduce turnover. So stay tuned. More information is going to come out about that. We'll be sure to get an email out for you when registration is open. And last off, let's get to today's presentation. I am delighted to introduce Jeremy York. He is a friend and a valued partner at Charitable Advisors. And as an HR consultant, Jeremy understands the people dynamics and how to transform an organization into a healthy, thriving, and positive workplace. As the president of Invigorate HR and also the co-author of the Joy Powered Organization, Jeremy brings 2 decades of expertise in human resource strategy and operations. So, Jeremy, it is great to have you back again.
Well, thank you, Julie. It's good to be here. It's good to have all of you joining us here today for this webinar. It certainly is going to be a great topic. I believe that all of you are going to, enjoy when we talk about our HR best practices for an ever-evolving world. And wow, when you think about just that title of an ever-evolving world and just everything that's going on right now within our world of employment, it just seems like we're drinking from a fire hose. It wasn't too long ago when we were dealing with the COVID pandemic and trying to navigate our ways through that. And now here we are, 5 years later, drinking from another fire hose as we look at things like AI, workplace changes, things that, people are wanting from their employers today, et cetera. And so that's where we're going to spend some of our time talking a little bit about that. As Julie said, I'm the lead consultant and president of InvigorateHR. We're an Indianapolis-based HR consulting firm. We've been around since 2013, and we pretty much work a great deal with nonprofits. We align ourselves with nonprofits because we believe all of the good work that goes into everything that you all do and being able to support our communities, and we want to be able to help you do that. So as far as our agenda and our roadmap for today, first we're going to dive into some of the demographic shifts that are reshaping our workforce, and we're going to examine how, employee expectations are evolving. What people want from us as an employer is different. As nonprofit leaders, it's important for us to understand that these changes that are, people are expecting from us, and it's crucial for us to be able to serve our communities and to be able to engage our teams effectively. Then we'll kind of pop over into the world of AI, and we'll talk about its growing influence on the workforce and workforce management, including, its promising applications and also some important privacy considerations that we need to take into account as we begin to embrace AI in our workplaces. We'll focus specifically on how nonprofits can leverage these tools while really kind of staying true to our values and our ethics along the way. Then we'll look at workplace culture, some retention strategies, looking at innovative approaches that'll help us align with today's evolving workplace, and really try to discuss some practical solutions that work within the nonprofit resource constraints, while at the same time, really kind of meeting our needs of a diverse workforce. And then we'll have some time for Q&A. So obviously, I've got the chat box up. If you do have questions along the way that you have, please feel free to put those in the chat, but we'll also save some time at the end for questions as well. So let's go ahead and get started and talk about the workforce landscape. And this is one of the things that isn't just changing, it's really evolving in ways that require us to think very differently about how we approach our people and how we approach HR in the nonprofit sector. What we'll really want to pay attention to, because I think it's important for us, as nonprofits and working in that nonprofit arena, to explore what some of these practical strategies are that can help your organization and help us be able to thrive in this environment. So let's take a look at some statistics as we kind of go around and look at this right now with some demographic shifts, right? So we're experiencing something really kind of unprecedented. And part of that is the simultaneous presence and of multiple generations in the workplace. And we've had that for a while. Some of you are saying, hey, that's not necessarily that new. Well, no, it's not. But the newness is the different perspectives that all of these generations have, bringing their own values, their own working styles, and bringing their own thoughts and things that are related to that. So, really, what the data tells us, it tells us a really kind of a fascinating story overall. And according to some research that was done by Deloitte, it says by 2025, which, hey, baby, we are here in 2025 right now, that millennials will constitute 75% of the global workforce. And I think we already see that. We see that within our workplaces where we have a majority of millennial workforce, right? So think about that for a moment, that 3/4 of your workforce will be from one single generation. Right now, we haven't had this in quite some time, right? The baby boomers was the largest generation before at one point in time. They made up the majority of that. Xers came in, start to shift. Millennials came in, boomers shifted out. Now we have, the millennials at 3/4 of our whole entire workforce along the way. And we also see that with these projections, when we're thinking about Generation Z that's coming into the workforce, that they'll make up about 30% by the year 2030. So in about 5 more years, we're going to see about 30% of the workforce being Generation Z. But here's where it gets really interesting for nonprofit leaders. And while we're welcoming all of these, younger generations into work, we're seeing a significant aging trend, right? And so we know that a quarter of the U.S. workforce will be over 55 years old at currently today that we see. So what this means for us is that we've got people who are aging out of the workforce, we've got people who are aging into the workforce, and then we have a huge part of component of people who are just kind of in the midst of their careers. And so that means that they're going to have a lot of movement. So for nonprofits, this really creates some challenges and some opportunities for us. And so one of the questions that we have to ask ourselves is how do we bridge generational gaps while being able to leverage the strengths that everyone brings, right? Each group has their own set of strengths in the way that they work. So how do we create, work? How do we create programs? How do we create, motivational components in work that will engage both our millennials and their desire to have purpose-driven work, as well as being able to retain the people who are aging out of the workforce, who maybe only want to work part-time, that maybe don't want to work full-time, and being able to play to those folks who are now coming into the workforce, right? That Generation Z. So we have to start looking at some of those things. Part of this means that we have to pay attention to what really is relevant to us. And so these evolving expectations of these different generations that are in the workforce that we're going to really pay attention to means that we are going to have to shift the way that we've looked at work and the way that we've done work in the past. So let's first talk about purpose-driven work, which is right up your alley as nonprofits, right? It's so much of what we do is purpose-driven work. And this is an advantage that we have as nonprofits, right? And so we know, according to this Deloitte research, that 63% of millennials believe that businesses should be focused on improving society rather than just generating profit. That's a good thing when we think about being able to draw people into the work that we do, right? And that aligns perfectly with our sector's mission driven nature, but it also means that we need to clarify and articulate and demonstrate our impact and retain talent. It's not just while purpose driven work is a driving factor that a lot of millennials want, it's not just enough to keep them there because there are lots of places where they can go to do purpose driven work. So we have to take that into consideration and think, okay, purpose driven work is important for these folks. And especially as we see with Generation Z, they have a real desire to want to make a difference. They're kind of folks that are really focused on social justice and trying to right the wrongs of the past and what we're doing in the future. So we have to understand, along with this purpose driven work, that we have to pay attention to work life balance. And this is something that's become non negotiable for most workers. I don't know if some of you are TikTokers or you're get into memes and you see these things a lot that are out there in social media. But, there's been this meme and this video going around that's like, hey, I'm being offered a job that pays 10% less, but allows me to be able to work from home. Am I considering it? And everyone's like, yes, we're totally considering it, right? It's something that's out there. Well, 72% of workers right now consider that being able to have work life balance is an important factor in their job choices. And part of that has to do with being able to have remote or hybrid kind of work schedules that allow them to be able to manage their personal lives and their families along with their work responsibilities, right? So we've got to think creatively about how we structure work arrangements, especially given that we're often limited on resources, right? And we don't necessarily have the most money. But if we know that work life balance is important, we can use that as leverage in being able to attract talent, right? And be able to understand that if we can offer purpose driven work and that we can also provide work life balance, those are important perspectives to the workforce. And that's really, really important. We see that a lot of people are demanding being able to have that flexibility and that hybrid work schedule or that remote kind of work. Now, I know I've been hearing it. People are saying, well, Jeremy, isn't that going away? We just saw the governor of Indiana call all the state workers back by July not to have remote work. We're seeing it in the federal government. And I look at it like this: just because people are, employers, and mostly in this government arena, and we're seeing it in some of the private sector too, but just because employers are mandating people to come back into the office doesn't mean that people will. So, and this is what employers are finding out is that with these mandates, the job market, people are saying, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to give up remote work. And so, therefore, is going to leave them with these huge gaps in staffing of people and being able to fill roles. So, just because people are saying it, or requiring it, doesn't mean the workforce is going to line up with it because there's still a lot of opportunity out there for that. Let's talk a little bit about career development. And perhaps one of the most striking components of data is around that. So LinkedIn did this whole research and they found that 94% of employees would stay longer at an organization if that organization invests in their development. And we know that with the current workforce, millennials and Generation Z, that career development, workforce development, goal development, developing me as an individual is really important to them. And it's really going to be crucial when we start focusing on our retention efforts. Now, in the nonprofit sector, where we often can't compete on just salary alone, right? We don't always have the most money. We can look at these things as far as, purpose-driven work. We can look at work-life balance and this professional development opportunity. And these are things that become an essential strategy for us to be able to have talent retention. We know that money is not the driving factor of all things with these particular folks who are in the workforce. It's these three areas, right? These employee expectations that may be different or have been different than what we're used to. And these expectations just aren't trends. They are really fundamental shifts in how people are viewing their relationship with work. Think about that. It's a shift in how people are viewing their relationship with work. So for nonprofits, that means meeting these expectations while being able to balance organizational constraints will be a key to our success in attracting and retaining our talented staff, right? And that's a big part of it. That directly aligns with what I was talking about earlier and the rise of remote and hybrid work. And so I won't spend a whole lot of time on this, but I think it's interesting for you to see some of the data and the stats. And the reason I provide, and I've been really data and stat heavy, and I will be for a little bit, is because so much of the argument with a lot of this comes from people making assumptions that people don't work as hard if they're remote or if they're hybrid, or we don't have the data to support that people want purpose driven work, or we don't have this. Well, I'm telling you, it's out there and we know what the data says, right? So some research that was done by McKinsey and Company, they revealed that 58% of American workers now have the opportunity to work from home at least one day a week. And this isn't a temporary change, it's reshaping the workforce expectations permanently. Even though, as I said, some people are trying to make folks come in, but people just aren't going to do it. They're not going to comply. They'll look for other jobs. There are already, opportunities for them to be out there, for them to take new jobs that are out there. The other thing is that we're also kind of shooting ourselves in the foot, especially for nonprofits, meaning that we already have a hard time being able to attract some of the best and brightest talent that's out there because of limited resources. Well, being able to incorporate remote work while still being able to meet our expectations is important because that allows us to be able to have some of our top picks, right? And people will be drawn to us because of that. You see, this preference for hybrid work is again, I find it striking because we look at it in this hybrid model where we can combine this flexibility of remote work with the collaboration or connection that we can do in-person interaction too. So it's a good hybrid piece that has profound implications. And Accenture found that 83% of workers preferred that kind of model. And a lot of people that I know and people you probably know that are out there that have a hybrid work model love it, right? The ability to be able to come into work, to meet with people, do what you need to do, and then the other ability to be able to work remotely, to be able to manage, and balance your work and your personal life. And, one of the things is that perhaps one of the most encouraging for nonprofit leaders is this productivity data. And that is that 77% of remote workers report increased productivity. Now, I don't know about you, if any of you get to work remotely or et cetera, but, and maybe it's a certain kind of worker, I don't know. And I would say this is kind of true for everyone that people are working a little bit more and they do more when they have that ability to be able to balance. Now, I know that's not everyone, and people like to say that, that one or two or three employees ruin it for everyone. Well, that's because we need to manage those people directly and not spoil it for everyone. And when we think about having, these challenges that exist with traditional kind of work and what hybrid allows us to be able to do, it helps us from a nonprofit point of these resource constraints that we have to, operate within. It helps us to be able to produce really strong overhead results. So when we look at these particular models, specifically in the nonprofit sector, we can look at it and ask ourselves, what can we do to ensure that we get the best people by offering this kind of workplace culture and looking at what's important to people? All why we're trying to maintain personal connections with our communities, with our people. How do we continue to ensure equitable access to, different work opportunities, and how do we balance all of this? Well, these are all questions you kind of have to address within your strategy as you're trying to figure out, what this looks like for you in being able to attract some of the best and top talent. So let's shift a little bit to look at another major component that's reshaping our workplace landscape. And this is the dramatic rise of what we like to call the gig economy. And the numbers are really kind of staggering. So when we look at some of these numbers, according to MasterCard's research, the gig economy was projected to reach 455 billion globally by 2023, which it did, right? We know that it did. These continued gig kind of components, reflect this fundamental change in how people are doing work. Remember how I said people have choices and that people are saying, I'm not going to go back into, if you're going to force me to come back to work full time, I'm not going to do that. I need to have more flexibility. Well, that's where these gigs come into play because people, and you may know some of these folks, are working 3 and 4 different part-time jobs that all fit within their schedule to make a full-time component, right? And they're doing that. They're doing things like freelancing, and we know that the data shows us that 36% of the U.S. workforce participate in this gig economy, and that was through freelancing, of where they're doing their own kinds of work and being their own kinds of bosses and doing things. And a lot of people like to argue and say, oh, well, I'm sure Uber and Lyft and all of those play into that. How many people are really going to do that? Well, the answer is a lot of people will do that to supplement their income if it provides a level of happiness to them to feel like they've got a better work-life balance. So it isn't just about ride sharing or delivery services that are out there, right? When people think about some of these gigs, it includes professionals across all kinds of sectors that have a lot of skills, and a lot of their skills are going to be vital to nonprofit organizations, right? We even see that in the nonprofit arena where people are, specializing in just grant writing, or they're specializing in just development, or they're specializing in other kinds of components of that. So What does this mean? Well, this means that, by 2027, half of the US population will have engaged in some type of gig work. So this shift just really shows you how people are approaching their viewpoints of work and what that means for them, right? So for a nonprofit, this could mean that we have to rethink our traditional employment needs, where we might have to consider more of these hybrid approaches, where we might have to look at gig workers or et cetera. I know I've had a lot of nonprofits reach out to us lately talking about, what gig working or independent contracting or working with consultants looks like for them, and what does that mean from the employment component. They're looking at this is a better way for them to be able to allocate and utilize their resources, and it's true, it's happening out there for a lot of people. So this could really help a lot of us that are out there that work in the nonprofit arena to access talent that was previously out of reach because we couldn't afford them, because now we can use people for only what we need, right? And we can parse it out into these uh, or this consulting work or this independent contractor work or whatever that might look like. So that is kind of a high level overview of what's going on just with the workplace dynamics of what people and workers are wanting and what they're looking to us as employers to be able to provide. And so that's something we have to pay quite a bit of attention to. So now I want to turn our attention to one of the most transformative forces in our workforce today, and that's artificial intelligence. And I want to share a statistic that might make some of us kind of sit up in our chairs, right? But according to Oracle's global study, 64%, get ready for this, 64% of people would trust a robot more than their manager. Now, stop and think that for a minute. Does I when I ask, does that surprise you? Well, it might, and maybe it doesn't. But I know that just means that is a lot of mistrust between employees and their manager, to where will feel like they would trust a robot more. And really, over half of people have already turned to AI for advice instead of their supervisor. So, this is a kind of a not just a provocative statistic; it's a wake up call for how we need to think about the future of how we connect with our people in all industries, not just nonprofits. From that, so but before you freak out or anything like that, let's kind of figure out what this really tells us, right? And so it suggests that people are turning to data-driven insights, right, for their work lives, where they want that. They want consistent, objective feedback and guidance, something that AI can particularly be good at. A lot of times they want it free of bias. And I'm going to put a caveat there because we'll talk about that later, because AI can be biased, but people can be more biased a lot of times than AI, right? And so that's really what they're looking at. So what we have to really pay attention to is that while we have AI being introduced into our workforce, it's an opportunity and a challenge, right? An opportunity for us to use new resources, but it can be a challenge for us to be able to look at how we harness, how we use AI, and also how we utilize it to enhance, not replace, but enhance our human connection. So, what you need to know about AI is a few different things here. And I'm going to share with you 6 kinds of AI trends that you need to know. And this comes from the Society for Human Resource Management's AI in the Workplace Playbook. And so this really is a bold, kind of realistic prediction by Shern that says that every worker will be touched by AI within a decade. And for nonprofits, this isn't just about technology adoption, it's about preparing our workforce for this inevitable change, that everyone is going to be using AI. Honestly, I don't know if you know this or not, but you probably were using AI before you even, excuse me, before you even knew it was AI. Right, I don't know, and I'm dating myself a little bit, but how many of you remember the little paperclip back in like Microsoft Office that would show up and you could ask it questions and it would tell you things, etc.? Well, that was AI. That was a form of AI even back then. It's just now that it's become much more enhanced, right? So we know people are going to be touched by it. The second point is really kind of fascinating, that says that the workplace will naturally select the AI curious, right? And that makes sense, right? that it's going to start to lean toward or lean into people or lean toward individuals who know how to use AI and that aren't afraid to use AI, and it's going to be a valuable career skill. So what we need to do is that we need to kind of foster this curiosity. AI is not going away. It's like the internet. When the internet came and people were skeptical, they're like, "Oh, this probably won't last long." Here we are. Our lives evolve around it, right? And revolve around it at the same time. But we have to know that AI is not going away, and we have to pay attention to that. We also have to know that AI has a role in being able to support inclusivity and well-being. And that's relevant for our sector because AI tools can help eliminate some of those biases in hiring that we might face, some of those biases for opportunities that get equal access to opportunities and support employee wellness and things like that. And yes, I said it can be unbiased, but we also have to be careful because we need to adopt AI with eyes wide open, meaning we need to know what we're getting into. And the information that we get out of AI is only as good as the information we put in. So if we're putting biased information in, or we're using or crafting prompts or crafting questions or things or utilizing AI with a biased lens, we're going to get biased information back. So, again, AI is not here to replace human beings, right? Now, some jobs will be replaced just because they are very tactical, but AI, is not going to replace every job. It's going to enhance it. And that's where I need you to know that you've got to learn how AI is going to work for your business and know that it will threaten jobs. Yes, it will threaten some of those tactical kinds of routine jobs, but we want that anyway. We don't like doing that work. We want to do work that allows us to be more strategic, allow us to do work that helps us be more effective and contribute to our mission. And AI will help us with those jobs. It's not going to threaten those jobs, but it's going to threaten those jobs that are going to be, it's those things that are just routine, right? Routine kinds of jobs. It's not going to really have a negative impact on us on those jobs that's going to have to do with empathy, creativity, relationship building, all those things that drive our mission. So we have to pay attention to that. So, some practical applications for AI as you're looking at it from an HR perspective. Well, some things are job descriptions, being able to use AI to help you craft job descriptions, recruitment messaging, right? It can be useful in being able to help you with effective outreach, helping to craft employee emails to ensure that you're getting all the information and they're well written. I don't know about some of you, but I'm sure if you're like me, sometimes you're reading the email 4 and 5 times before you send it to make sure it sounds right, et cetera, and you're changing it every time. Well, AI can help streamline that process. We can look at it for things like performance reviews and helping to craft those, policy documents, HR reports, things of that nature. FAQ documents can easily be generated and maintained more easily and quickly by utilizing AI. And crisis communications. That's particularly something we're probably not all very good at, right? And being able to think about all the kind of components that go into crisis communication. Well, AI can help us do those kind of things. You see, the key about these practical applications for AI is to see it not as replacements for human judgment. It's just to be able to help us, kind of create the ideas to get the creativity. I liken it like this. AI is no different than me getting with my coworker and bouncing ideas off of one another and getting each other's input. I can use AI for that. However, it does not eliminate the need for us to make sure that whatever we come up with, whatever the solutions are, make sense, that are aligned with what we're trying to accomplish, et cetera. So that human judgment always has to have that component. And when we're thinking about human-centered work that drives our mission, we can't remove the human element of that. So we have to make sure that we're paying attention. So again, some of these components that we can dive into where AI is revolutionizing how we kind of manage people and manage some of these HR processes. Let's talk about each of these individually. So talent acquisition. So how is AI transforming talent acquisition? Well, we understand that the traditional approach to recruitment often meant posting a job and hoping that right candidates would find it. But AI is revolutionizing this process in two key areas. And first one is in sourcing and the way that we find or look for candidates. So AI goes far beyond, just doing simple keyword matches or things like that that we may have done in the past, right? And that some tools have. It can understand sometimes the nuances of experiences. It can help us be able to identify transferable skills from one position to the next, and even predict, in some instances, candidate success based on comprehensive data analysis. Now, you might be saying, okay, Jeremy, this is way over my head. I don't know what you're talking about. We're still doing things pen and paper kind of wise when recruiting. Well, the thing is that there are these tools that are called applicant tracking systems that are already building AI components into it to be able to help you with this. So this means that a lot of it, these applicant tracking systems, where you actually put the job into the system, it posts the job for you, it'll help write the job, it'll help do all of this data analysis, et cetera, that will streamline these processes for you. So these applicant tracking systems can do that. The second component is where AI can be very beneficial is in screening and interviewing. And so AI can kind of help us overcome one of our biggest challenges here, which is human subjectivity, which we know we've all can raise our hands and say, yes, we've made a bad hire because we were more subjective than objective, right? And so what AI can help us do here is gather and analyze some data from, successful hires, other similar roles, et cetera, to be able to help us prepare more targeted and effective interview questions. So if you're terrible at being able to understand what interview questions that you should have, or you're not quite skilled at being able to craft behavioral-based interview questions, you can take a job description, upload it into AI a lot of times, and ask them to create behavioral-based interview questions with the focus on XYZ skills that you're looking for. And AI can provide those for you and create that interview guide for you to use while you're interviewing and talking to candidates, right? That allows you to have a greater focus on this candidate skill sets. It allows you to have more context in the nature of the job and understanding it. And also it can help you just be able to understand if this candidate might have other transferable skills that you could use within the organization. But remember, AI in hiring isn't about removing the human element. I don't want you to think that we're replacing, recruitment or talent acquisition with AI. We're not. It's about enhancing our decision-making processes with data that we gain from the use of AI through creating, interview guides, interview questions, sifting through data, reviewing candidate resumes, things of that nature. So it's important for us to be able to understand that we still have to have that human element there. But what about onboarding? Well, AI is also helping us transform how we look at the onboarding process by making it more efficient and effective for both, for both nonprofit organizations and both new employees, right? For both of us. So let's talk about what that looks like. Well, part of it is automation of administrative tasks, right? And again, some of these applicant tracking systems or other onboarding tools that you have will help you be able to manage some of this process through, AI techniques. But AI can now automate many of these steps, these administrative steps, like new hire paperwork, et cetera. And that can be really, really overwhelming at times, right? And it can also help you create a more positive candidate experience because we know that most of our employees are used to a self-service world, right? To where they can go in and do the things they need to do and get it done. So while AI helps us, with efficiency, and it's not just about efficiency, but it's also about making sure that we're creating a consistent and compliant onboarding process while making sure that we're freeing up, whoever's managing this process from a lot of these administrative tasks to focus on more strategic aspects of welcoming the new team members that come on board. And so, as I said before, with these tools that are out there, one of the most exciting can be these 24/7 onboarding access where people can log into, these systems, be able to do the paperwork at any point in time, where they can complete all of this necessary documentation at their own pace and get it done prior to starting, right? And so AI can help us be able to sift through and shorten that time period to productivity where we can have people hit the ground running faster. And we all know that that is the expectation, right? And when we're talking about this, as well, we understand onboarding is important, but very few of us spend the time doing the tasks within onboarding that are necessary to be successful and to help employees be successful. So being able to utilize some of these tools that are out there from AI can help you with that. What about learning and development? That's another area that we talk about and spend time in that we also say, oh, gosh, it's so hard. I don't have time to work on, learning and development for people. I don't have time for, training or to identify training, et cetera. Well, let's talk about how personalized learning paths can be created by AI. AI can now look at an employee's, job description. We can even put in like things like their work habits, skill interests, projects that they're working on, et cetera. And we can kind of create these career learning plans, and AI can generate those for us. It's all about looking at the individualized component and these personalized learning paths as opposed to looking at it as a one size fits all kind of training, which is traditionally how we've sort of approached some of these types of learning and development tasks, right? And so this automation of training content and creation and delivery that AI can help us with is a game changer because it can generate, once we do these paths, create these paths, it can generate some of this training materials or help us to ensure we've got the right kind of content or things of that nature. And this is especially helpful for resource constrained nonprofits where efficiency is really invaluable because we don't have a lot of time, we don't have a lot of money, and it can still allow us to be able to do some things to help employees be able to get the learning and development that they need. So that's a big part of that, as well as looking at another aspect too is what we would call collaborative training. And AI helps can facilitate this by identifying, if there are opportunities for cross-functional learning within environments. Okay, so let me stop. I know I've been talking a whole lot and saying a great deal here, and hopefully you all aren't overwhelmed by this yet. I know it's a lot of information, but the one thing that I need you to stop and you might be asking is like, okay, Jeremy, you're telling me all this is great, but I don't know, how does it know all of this? How does it come to understand it, et cetera? Well, part of it is about the information that we give it, and it already has a wealth of information. And a lot of the things that are foundational elements of these people processes are foundational across the board, and it already has those things. So when you utilize AI, it can make those assumptions to help you understand, what some of these future components might be in modifying, curricula. Or capturing learner engagement and things of that nature and transform the way that you look at these pieces. And this is what's so important, especially when we think about the whole component of engagement and what that means. And AI, well, let me say this is that you might think, how can AI totally, how can it help us and enhance employee engagement in an area that seems seemingly and inherently human, right? Right? Well, the thing is that it's the way it approaches it, right? It's the what it learns and what it understands about the way human beings actually learn, right? And how they get engaged. So AI has this ability for us to create engagement surveys, engagement strategies. It has this ability to be able to help us with engagement questions. It can even it can even look at and analyze the data that we provide it as well in engagement results to be able to help us craft strategies. And I'm getting very strategic and way down the road, but I'm not going to dive in too much detail, but I want you to know that this is how it can help us, right? It can start out as little as doing like employee satisfaction surveys, these personalized learning and development plans for engagement, and also these routine tasks. But we can take it a step so much farther in understanding how it can help us be a great deal more strategic in the things that we're doing. All right, so let me shift over here to AI and data privacy in HR and the workforce and things that you need to pay attention to as it relates to this. So one is key privacy concerns, and this is something that everyone's been talking a lot about. So as we embrace AI, we also got to address the critical aspects that sits at that intersection of the benefits of AI, privacy concerns, and ethical considerations. So we want to look at these four key concerns around, AI. And first one is data collection and storage. So we've got to gather more, more resources to put behind our use of AI if we're going to be utilizing more of it. And what I mean by that is that we'll need to have some type of robust protocols for how we handle data and collect data and any of that kind of information. So we've got to make sure that when we handle sensitive information, whether it's about employees or constituents, that we've got the right kinds of things in place to be able to address that. We also have to look at these biases. Now, remember, I said I was going to hold a caveat here for this for ethical implications of these biases in AI. So, AI, while it is generally their systems are unbiased, they're only as unbiased as, remember what I said, the data that is put into them or they're trained on. So we've got to be vigilant about ensuring that we're not putting biases into, our AI prompts or our AI questions or, the results we're looking to get from all of that. So we've got to make sure that our tools that we use from an AI standpoint don't perpetuate existing biases in, anything, whether it's hiring, promotion, development decisions, any of those kinds of things. Thirdly, we have to monitor and make sure that we're looking at how we monitor and survey how we're using AI. And while AI can provide us a lot of background on productivity and engagement, we've got to balance that with the respect for privacy for our employees, et cetera. And that's going to require us to be transparent and to be able to explain how we utilize AI. So I say at this point in time, if you don't have an AI policy and you don't have something in your organization crafted around how AI is to be used, it's something you need to probably move to the top of your list because I guarantee that your employees probably are already using AI, whether you know it or not, and being able to do their work. So you've got to understand what those policies, should entail. And part of that is looking at, again, and on this particular slide, these are the successful components of an AI policy, talking about privacy and surveillance, bias and discrimination, how human judgment is to be used, accountability, and maybe even job displacement about what that is. The last one, we don't see as many policies talk about job displacement, but we do see the policies talking about how AI can be used to perform more routine tasks, of jobs and things of that nature, and what that might be based on your own particular circumstance of your organization and how you choose to be able to use that. So let's all take a breath. Let's all take a breath because it's a lot, right? So as we navigate like this digital transformation of the workforce and what that looks like, we need to make sure that we're paying attention to some of these core areas. And a lot of that is things like trust and psychological safety at the very top of it, right? Making sure that we, as we take on this new meaning in the digital age of what we're doing, that we're not, and we're not all in the same physical space. We need to be intentional about how we create our environments where people feel safe to speak up and share ideas and even make mistakes. And it's crucial as we talk about innovation and how we use AI and how we, influence human judgment with all of this. We need to make sure that we're having inclusion at virtual events. We need to make sure we're being clear on our mission and our values, that we're recognizing and showing appreciation for people, that we have open communication about our digital platforms of what we're using and what we're doing, that we continue to learn and to grow, and that we do that both in person and virtually that people want, and how we celebrate milestones in our achievements. What does that look like? Because it's all changing. The way that we had built our workforce that was primarily all an in-person based workforce and what people's expectations are now are totally different, which means we're going to have to take a good look at ourselves to be able to determine what that looks like. We have to look at what kinds of things are important for employee engagement. What do people want? How are we going to retain them? What does that look like? Well, we know it's meaningful work. We know it's flexibility. We know that it's growth opportunities, work-life balance, having an inclusive environment where everyone feels like they can participate. We also know that we have to look at some of these retention strategies of what that means for us, right? What is that? Well, maybe personalized benefit packages. We're starting to see, and we have been for the last couple of years, instead of monetary benefits, people are negotiating more PTO. They don't want their raises. They want more time off. Maybe it's gig work, right, for people within your organization, or job rotation programs. Maybe it's mentorship and even reverse mentorship initiatives being how we do that, right? And maybe we're taking some of our more seasoned workers, pairing them with our less than seasoned workers, because there's a lot of things that the new workforce can teach some of our more seasoned workers. Maybe it's things like paid volunteer time. Maybe it's continuous feedback and recognition systems and people being able to be celebrated for the work that they do. You see, the thing is that employee engagement and retention require us to look at the whole individual. You know, we're used to looking at our entire employee. Now we have to look at it a little bit more of an individual perspective. And luckily, for a lot of us in the nonprofit area, that means that it's easier for us to do that because we have smaller workforces, right? Than what we might be able to do in a really large workforce. So we have to look at those things. We also have to address one of the most neglected aspects of workforce management today, which is mental health and well-being. And you probably are seeing it mentioned a lot by your people. And I know within our industry in the nonprofit arena, mental health and well-being initiatives have been talked about a lot over the last several years. But it just seems like now we're starting to get more traction about what this is, right? Think about the work that you do in your nonprofits, where staff often deal with challenging social issues while being able to manage, dealing with managing limited resources for people. Yeah, those are all things that we have to look at that maybe we weren't looking at 5 or 8 years ago. Things like mental health support. Whether we have an EAP, an employee assistance program, or maybe it's we need to create environments where mental health conversations are normalized and people talk about it. And instead of saying, hey, I'm taking a PTO day, people are saying, hey, I'm using some PTO for a mental health day. And let that be the norm and let that be okay. Maybe it's physical wellness, and that remains fundamental. And while gym memberships are nice, it's not always something that people can pay for and get. So how do you create more opportunities for movement and healthy choices within the work? Maybe it's other kinds of things. And you can even do this virtually if you've got a virtual team where you have virtual groups that are just like, we're going to stand up on our desks for 3 minutes and we're going to have that kind of time built in, whatever that might be. Pencil it in as a meeting. Maybe it's financial well-being where people have to really think about their financial components of their personal lives. And this is really increasingly important, particularly in the nonprofit sector where salaries may not match for-profit levels and people need a little extra help. So maybe it's financial education, planning resources, creative benefits around that, just bringing in a financial advisor just to talk with people. A lot of times they'll do that for free, right? Things like work-life integration. And notice I say work-life integration instead of work-life balance because work-life integration recognizes that work and life aren't opposing forces, even though it has kind of been set up that way a lot. It's about creating these flexibility and flexible work, plans that allow people to do their best work and be their best selves at work and home. So what does that look like? And think about social connection and well-being. And the social connection, this well-being, and this belonging, they're vital, especially for our increasingly digital world where people can easily become isolated. And so for nonprofits whose work usually centers on building community, working with people, we need to ensure we're creating that same sense of community internally with our people when we look at these things. So, these aren't just nice to have programs. We really have to look at how they're going to be essential to the workforce and what the workforce demands. And a lot of times people have thought that the employer sets kind of the rewards for the employees, et cetera, but that has been changing significantly. And I think most of you know that, to where it's the workers, it's the employees who are setting the demands. And we have to look at how we can best meet those while still delivering on our core mission of the organization. And not everyone likes to do that. There's leaders who don't subscribe to that, that run organizations. And a lot of times those organizations find themselves being behind and not being an employer of choice versus other organizations that, do these things that find them being more of an employer of choice and being able to hire the folks that they want. So this is just a slide just to show some innovative well-being programs that are out there that you can utilize. And I've mentioned some of these before, but these are all things that you can look at and think about being able to, implement and utilize from that. And mostly more than anything, I want to kind of wrap up as we conclude today just with some action areas for people leaders. And these are all things that are important as we talk about this, evolving world of our workforce of HR, right? Is one is embrace demographic diversity, and we have to move around. I was on a call yesterday with some the leaders, HR leaders around the country, and with things that are happening with the word diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI, what we're seeing happening within government, et cetera. And one of them made a comment that I thought was very bold and brazen, given what we're going through today, which is diversity and DEI is not a bad word, and it isn't. It's not going away. And those of us who have been in the diversity game and talking about DEI for a long time understand what it is and what it isn't. And we know that diversity is really about looking at everyone and what everyone's being able to bring to the table and not giving preferential treatment to a particular group, et cetera. So we know that demographic diversity is important for us to have. All the things that make up an individual, those are all things that are important to us. And that's all things that your workforce is going to um, find important as well. You want to look at implementing ethical AI solutions. You want to think about how you cultivate adaptive organizational culture with this new way of working, this new world, how we innovate engagement and retention strategies and reimagine learning and development, and how we prioritize holistic well-being and looking at the individual and the whole person of what's important to them. These are all action items and action areas we have to look at in being able to move forward in this new evolving world of work. It's not going away. We're not going to be going backwards. AI is here to stay. What people want from the workforce is here to stay. They're making it very clear, and they're making it very clear that they will not um, defer to other things, that they would rather, piecemeal jobs in a gig kind of fashion as opposed to work somewhere where they don't feel valued and feel like they are doing purpose driven work. All things which I think really work to our favor as a nonprofit. So before we wrap up, I'd like for us just to take a moment to turn our insights into some action. And maybe, we've covered a lot of ground and I talked a great deal today, and hopefully I didn't overwhelm you too much. But for those of you who ever attended any of my sessions or have heard me speak before, you know that I am very big on making sure you have a lot of information to be able to take and utilize however you see fit. So, one thing I always challenge everyone with at the end is saying, what's one practice that you plan to implement based on today's session? What's something that you feel like that you could really impact for that? So, um, so if you wouldn't mind, I would love for you just to drop that in the chat to show everyone what it is you're thinking about, what's on your mind today with all of this. So if you'll drop what's that action plan is, just list it out there in the chat. Maybe you'll give someone an idea. You'll inspire someone else to think differently about what they're approaching it. But I think those are great things. So I see a question. Sarah said, "Hey, I may have missed it, but did you share some of your favorite and trusted AI tools?" I did not, but I will tell you tools that I like to use. Everyone knows Chat GPT. Another one that I like to use is Claude AI, and it's CLAUDE.ai. There's also Perplexity, which is another great AI tool. So there's so many out there that are springboarding right now. So, but those are just some of the ones that I like to use from that. So, all right. Well, I'm going to turn it over to questions. And Julie, I'll punt it back to you and see if we have any questions that are coming in.
I see one here in the chat, Jeremy. Sarah's asking, does anyone have an example of an AI use policy for a nonprofit?
It's a great question. And I think there are, one of the things that you can do, this could be a really good exercise for all of you, is maybe to go to AI and ask it to create a policy for your organization. You might be surprised with what it generates, when you put that in, but you might want to utilize AI to help generate that for you. It's a great question.
Well, I think we're at the top of the hour here. I just want to value everyone's time. So thank you everyone for showing up. And can you please give Jeremy a thank you in chat? Jeremy, it was an overwhelming amount of information, but it certainly does give a game plan of what to work for towards. And if I just break this down in bite size and say, okay, I'm just going to do this first quarter, second quarter, it's not quite as overwhelming, but also very exciting. So thank you very much. Again, be looking for an email from me for our next HR peer group on skills-based job ad writing. And if you haven't completed the 2025 Central Indiana Salary Survey, please do put that on your calendar. Thank you. We appreciate all of you and have a blessed day.